So, welcome back to another episode of the Half and Half Scarf Football Podcast with me, Nick, and my mate Dom. Well, when I say me, Nick, and my mate Dom, today, for only the fifth time in our 59 episodes, we've got a very special guest, and I mean a special guest. We're meeting sports journalism royalty. We're meeting a guy who's got a beautiful new book out and plenty of other football observations to share, and also a back catalogue of work that is absolutely exceptional. So, without further ado, we're going to welcome to our little podcast that we're very delighted to have on. We're going to welcome Harry Harris. So, Harry, welcome to the Half and Half Scarf Football Podcast.
Well, my pleasure to be on there. Which half do you want? This half or that half?
It depends if you lean towards a club that is red or blue, but
I see.
we might get to that later on. Dom, I know you're particularly delighted when we said that we got Harry on. You were like a giddy kipper, weren't you?
Oh, I was. I've read quite a few of your books, Harry, and I couldn't believe you wanted to come on our little podcast. But I'm overjoyed that you are, and I'm really looking forward to asking you some questions and getting to know you a bit more. So it's a real privilege for us. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm just so pleased that I've got a reader.
Yeah, you've
I
got
think
many, sir. You've got many.
I think you'll have more than that. Let's look at the accolades. Let's look at the back catalogue. Let's do the introduction properly. So, Harry has won British Sports Report of the Year twice. He's won Sports Story of the Year also twice. And up to the last time I looked on Wikipedia, which might be 24 journalism awards, maybe slightly more than that in the last couple of years. Now, I've described him as a member of the British sports journalism royalty. It really is British sports journalism royalty. And we're going to go through, you know, you've got a brilliant new book out, visually beautiful, but also really well researched. And the book is called The History of the World Cup, On the Pitch and Off the Drawing Board. It's out now on Amazon and all good bookshops. We'll put links into the show notes about how to get hold of it. It's co-authored and illustrated by Paul Trevillion, with contributions from no other than Osvaldo Ardilles. So it's actually book four in a series, which we'll come to. And it's, as I say, it's a beautifully researched but beautifully visually appealing book as well. We'll get into all that. But first, let's get a little bit to know a little bit about you, Harry Harris, the journalist extraordinaire and broadcaster, because you're a man who's been on many sort of broadcasting platforms as well. So, Dom, over to you. Let's kick off.
So we've got to start with the accolades, Harry. We've got to. But I was really interested in what does being voted Sports Journalist of the Year actually entail? And in winning it twice, was it for particular coverage of particular stories, or in a specific year, or for a body of work in those years? Is there something that you have to do to be voted for that accolade?
Well, Dom, I don't think it's a vote as such. What it is, it's the Organisation of Sports Journalists Association, and they appoint a panel of judges who look, certain judges look into certain categories,
Yeah.
and they have hundreds upon hundreds of entries each year, and depends on the category, But my category, which is breaking news and investigative stuff, it's Sports Story of the Year. I don't think many have won it twice. I don't think many football writers, if at all, have won it twice. And then once you've qualified for that, all the other specific categories, someone's decided that it would be the Sports Journalist of the Year. So to have won that twice for a football writer is hopefully something to be proud of, and I'm very proud of those awards. Of course, I also won and I've got one of the silver hearts from the over here. It's the Variety Club of Great Britain Sporting Award Contribution to Journalism, which is probably the proudest award I've got. A massive, great big silver heart, and that really is something special. There's not many football writers or sports writers acquire those awards.
What I would say to you is going back to the first, so the Sports Story, which you've won twice, leads to the Sports Journalism Award. The Sports Story is almost like the judges entry point for then saying, well, actually, that sports story is brilliant. He's won the award for that in that category. That makes you then a sort of shortlist for the Sports Journalist Award. Then with your and it's a peer group, isn't it? That's even more impressive when
Yeah.
your peers are choosing you from a whole host of people. You should be rightly proud.
Well, it's as you can see, I've got my wall plastered with all those awards. It's the only place I can put them, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, it's something special, and yeah, proud of them. And I know you mentioned my current book, but I'm coming up to my 50th year in journalism, or in excess of that, really. And I'm coming up to my 100th football book. So
Right.
I'm going to actually do something completely different, and maybe you might want me back on to discuss that. But it's going to be a history of journalism and of football over a long period of time, half a century, and
Wow.
how both have changed from the 70s, well, 60s, even 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and so on. How the whole media structure has changed. So I think it would be kind of a reference book for anyone who wants to be a writer, football writer, journalist in the
Excellent.
current stream of things, as well as how it happened in the past. And there's not many of those kind of authentic books for references for potential up and coming young journalists, other than the usual kind of almost like school books
Yeah.
on the subject. But this is based on experience and the kind of qualities that you might need to succeed to become a football writer.
Well, we'll certainly put that on the list for coming back. But just going back to the two sports stories, can I ask you what stories were that got you sports football story of the year award? Then what were the two stories, if you can remember what the investigative coverage was?
Well, the funny thing is, it always rankles with me that there was two stories that I did produce that didn't win any awards, and one was the detailed investigation into Terry Venables, which ended with his 7 year DTI ban, and it was 11 criminal charges. And I think that was, producing those sort of like authentic documents, damning documents, I thought deserved an award, and also breaking the story of Paul Merson's cocaine and alcoholism,
Mm,
and subsequently advising him how to avoid a life ban from the FA at the time, because it was something very unusual. And neither of those won an award, nor did when I started moving on to the internet, broke the story of the takeover at Liverpool and Manchester United, and neither of those won an award.
right.
And there was a lot of debate about why that was, and one in particular was because the News of the World journalist, the one who sort of went undercover and exposed people in a manner which was particularly alien to me, but particularly as he was found out to be a complete fraud and
Right.
used illegal methods. And I finished second to him, and
Oh,
I've been campaigning with the Sports Journalists Association to say, well, why have you allowed him to continue to have won that award when his
mm.
methods were obviously exposed as being illegal?
I can
Yeah.
imagine that rankling. Dom, you got another question about in terms of his regular Harry's regular exposure to the media, etc. Yeah.
Well, I'm over the years you've been a regular on everything, particularly in terms of football, Five Live, Radio 4, Talk Sport, on Football Focus, appearing on the original Hold the Back page, which is amazing. And the on Jimmy Hill's Sunday Supplement on Sky, which I absolutely loved that show. I've always
I
been a
did.
big fan of Jimmy, and so you've had quite some career in terms of journalist, author, contributing on TV programs, and it's quite some career. And I say today, you've been doing it over 50 years, but obviously clearly no sign of stopping. But for me, how did you get into sports journalism, and was it football that was always the hook for you to wanting to get into that, or have you got just a general liking for sport in general, Harry?
No, it was the hook was football, but you didn't mention Richard and Judy. I mean,
How did I miss that one? I can't believe
Well,
that.
the point about it is, what football writers get invited onto Richard and Judy? But that was hilarious because I had my own dressing room and I
Wow.
had my own dresser,
Oh,
and
wow.
some young lady came in and said, "Oh no, you're wearing the wrong tie. It might clash with Richard's tie, and I think we might need a different jacket." When I left, I was presented with this great big box full of lovely kind of smellies and things like that were given away to all guests. It was quite unusual. But I'm still regularly on TV. I'm on GB News
Yeah.
virtually once or twice a week these days.
Yeah.
So what? How did you get into it then? What sports journalism as a career? When you were you studying for it? Did you fall into it by accident? Was it deliberate?
Well, this is the detail I'm going to put in this next book,
Yeah.
Okay.
which is called the Black Book. So when I say the Black Book,
Yeah.
Lord Sugar said, "If you're not in this Black Book, you're no one of any consequence."
We'll keep your powder dry on that. We don't want to spoil the
Yeah. We
reveal
don't.
in your next book, which is fine. That's great. So, Dom's already mentioned prolific author. We've mentioned that the new book is number 4 in an ongoing long-running series, but you've also written books that include History of the Wags, El Tel, Jose Mourinho and Chelsea's greatest ever year, Bobby and Tina Moore, The Rise of Posh and Becks, and like you say, 99 others. So we can't go through all of them. I'm really intrigued though, because your body of work is wide and varied within that environment. What do you look for as an inspiration for a subject matter? What's the hook that gets you into thinking that's for me? Is there a consistency about something? How does it work?
Well, it's a good question, but I'm really a fan. You asked that question about how did I get into journalism. It's really because I wanted to be a footballer and didn't have any skill or any application to be one. So that
Yeah.
was the next best thing, and discovering that there's someone out there that would pay me to go and watch all these football matches. I just couldn't believe that's possible. But
Yeah.
anyway, 10 million football matches later, here I am. But yeah, it's the inspiration comes from the subject matter themselves. I'm inspired by certain people. I'm proud to have written books from Pele to Maradona to George Best and people like that. It's an inspiration to me. The subject matters. It's either a very good story or someone I've admired watching playing football. And invariably, in fact, 99% of the time, it's a subject matter of my choosing that I take to a publisher rather than they come to me and saying, "Would you like to write a book about this or that?"
I mean, you
Yeah.
mentioned some icons there, didn't you? We'll talk about it later on with a question later on about kind of some of the matches you've seen and all that kind of thing. But if you've been inspired by Pele, Maradona, and people of that nature, and then can not only get paid to go and watch them, but then paid to research and write about them and publish books about them, I'll be honest with you, Harry, you've had a career that most people would just say, "Wow, that is a fantastic thing to find a passion and an energy and a love for what you do." And like you say, get paid to do the thing that you wanted to do, which is go watch zillions of football matches.
Well, I was inspired by Pele. Who wasn't inspired by Pele? And there's so much debate currently about whether Messi is the all-time greatest. I think he spoiled his copybook in that final, obviously, and leading a team of thugs in the competition.
Yeah.
But for me, Pele, I mean, he always said to me that when I was born, my parents broke the mold, and there'll never be another Pele. But inspired by reading stories about the Brazilian teams, of the great Brazilian teams of the past, and having watched them, the greatest ever Brazilian team in 1970.
Oh yeah.
I once, well, I interviewed Pele many times, and I once said to him, "Look, I really would like to write your life story." And he sort of like looked at me very funny, and I thought, "Oh God, he's going to say, no way you're going to do that." And I really wanted his endorsement before I embarked on it. He stood up, and I stood up as well, and he gave me a great big hug. And he said, "I can't believe anyone would want to write my life story." And I said, well, I do. And he said, great, and I interviewed him dozens of times after that. But the thing about it was he was at that period having a very dip in his popularity with FIFA. They hadn't invited him, as they had done previously for World Cups, to be front and centre of the tournament. He'd had a political career in Brazil that didn't pan out as he'd wished, and his popularity had taken a little bit of a dip at that particular time. So I think he was actually grateful that someone wanted to write his life story. But as soon as it was published, he was back at the peak of his of interest.
I would say, by the way, I totally,
So,
hang on, I totally agree with you about the 1970 Brazil team, though, by the way,
yeah,
Harry. I started watching my first World Cup in 1970, and it was that Brazil team, and that I watched it in colour, the yellow and the blue shorts in colour as an 8-year-old, just outstanding. And I've loved football ever since, and it was all part of that process. Sorry, Doma. Yeah.
I was just going to say on that subject of Pele, I've got to ask you, Harry, what was he like as a person? Got to ask that question because he comes across so well. So it's never met anyone who's met him before. So what was your take on him?
Well, I was sort of like taken aback by how small he was. Wow. For someone who was so powerful in the air.
Yeah.
Reminded me very much like Cliff Jones when I first met him, how small and slight. Yet when I watched him as a boy at White Hart Lane as a Spurs fan, it was just flabbergasting how high and how much he soared in the air and was so powerful. And so was Pele. Yet when I first met him, I just couldn't believe how small he was. But he battled through various languages. So wherever I interviewed him, whether it was in Italy, Spain, or wherever it might be, he made an effort to speak the language. And he was obviously very articulate, very intelligent, and whatever he had to say was just, made headline news, particularly if it was something controversial. And having had one-to-ones with him many times and sat down and asked him some questions that normally wouldn't be asked, he generated some unbelievable headlines for me over the years.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, he was up there iconically with Muhammad Ali, wasn't he, as the sporting icon of the entire 20th century. It depends on which side of the line you fall, whether it's boxing or football. But everybody in the world knew who Pele was, like they did with Muhammad Ali, and to interview him many times and meet the guy. But also, I suspect to think this guy's just quite normal and humble. Quite an honour, I would imagine.
Yes, yeah, but also meeting Diego Maradona and Johan Cruyff and George Best and Glenn Hoddle and Bobby Charlton, Dennis Law. I feel sitting back here talking about it rather pleased about.
Oh, you should do. Yeah.
Wow. Not too shabby. Not too shabby, as we say up in Yorkshire there, Harry. Dom,
but Kevin Keegan, Kenny Dalglish, the list goes on. I've interviewed them, written about them, written books on them. To me, it's just an incredible history of the game, and that's why I mentioned the Black Book, which will be a history of football over at least half a century. But simultaneously, a history about how journalism has changed, how writing about football has changed.
Well, you're in a unique position to do that, aren't you? Because 50 years or so. I mean, you're spanning every decade and being able to comment and how it's all changed in that time frame, and you're still doing it now. So you have a really unique perspective on it. So I'm looking forward to that book already, to be honest. But let's talk about the current book, A History of the World Cup, on the pitch and off the drawing board. So it's actually book 4 in a series of excellent books about the World Cup. Could you tell us a little bit about this fascination, how it started with book 1, and what readers can expect from not only the series, but this particular installment of the series?
Well, I'm a bit of a youngster in comparison to Paul Trevillion. He's in '93. But he's still, I would say, the world's greatest sports artist. Even now, he keeps on telling me he can draw a straight line, which he can. And he's made speeches at several of the book launches. You need to be there to listen to them. They're unbelievable. I mean, he recently auctioned his Churchill drawing for £100,000, and he said, when I'm dead, like all the great artists, it'd be worth 10 times as much. But I'd collaborated with him on a book of his art in a previous World Cup many years ago, and because I don't know why it was, because it's a long time ago now, just occurred that his back catalogue of art, it must be unbelievable, huge amount of historic drawings that are just in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah.
So, knowing how much of a big Spurs fan he is, and I am, we started off just seeing how it might work, a history of Spurs in art form, with all the personal stories I've had with all the managers and players over the history of the club, and owners, of course. And it turned out to be just such a beautiful book, in great paper, large scale book, hundreds upon hundreds of his drawings. And it took off. The Spurs fans loved it. They bought it in large quantities. Then we moved on. We did a Chelsea one, and that sold even more, and that got slightly bigger. And then we did a Manchester United one, and that was absolutely huge. You couldn't pick it up. And then we thought, oh, well, look, let's do a World Cup one, because we were coming up to the World Cup, and that's how it originated, and that's how this one came out. We think it's probably the best one, because the previous three had certain colours in it, but the World Cup one, the kaleidoscope of colours from all the different teams, all the different eras. I mean, it makes it really stand out.
Yeah, it does. It's a beautiful thing. It's
great reviews.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of this particular book, and it's been reviewed on Apple News, on 442 magazine, a special interview with Trevillion on BBC Today programme for about 5 minutes. We've been interviewed about it on Radio London, and now you're talking about it. So we've had lots of reviews, but ironically, we actually launched it. We had a launch party at the Argentine embassy.
Oh.
Wow.
And we had
we might after the recent World Cup histrionics, we might just leave the Argentine kind of.
No one kicked us or abused us there. It was they were all very friendly, and food and the drink was fabulous, and 100 people turned up, and virtually all of them bought a book. And it was a great occasion.
And I think the book has to be big, doesn't it, Harry? Because it really showcases Paul's work. I think it really makes it stand out and really pop. I think if it was a small book, as much as his art's beautiful, I think having a big book just shows it all in all its glory, really, doesn't it?
I don't think.
So my next question, Harry, is: over the years, how many World Cups have you attended, and what have been some of the sporting highlights you've witnessed in up close and personal? And do you have a number one or a top three from those experiences?
I do, Dom. Yeah. Obviously, the first one was probably one of the best, which was 1986, being in the Azteca, following England all the way to the Azteca, and Diego Maradona's goals. But everyone focuses on the hand of God goal, obviously.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a little known one, but Glenn Hoddle was fouled round about the halfway line before the ball bounced up to Maradona. So if you'd had VAR back then, neither goal would have been allowed.
I agree. Yeah.
Which is quite amusing. But before the tournament, it was a very strange experience. But I've got to know Osvaldo Ardilles very well. And you mentioned the fact that he contributed to the World Cup book on the pitch and off the drawing board, which was very nice of him. But I was on the Daily Mirror, and I asked him as a favour. I said, look, you've asked Diego Maradona to turn up for your testimonial match at the Lane. I said, it's a great coup, got a lot of publicity, but I said, would you do me a favour? Any chance I could have 5 minutes with him? It would be a great exclusive and very cool for me. He said, yeah, of course, sure, no problem at all. He said, right, come to the hotel where he's going to stay. And the story behind that, which I didn't actually know at the time, is that his coach had said, we're going from one pre-season game in Europe to another. And there's no way you're travelling between those two games within 24 hours just to play in a testimonial match. You're going to stay with the squad.
Yeah.
And Diego, being Diego, said, I run this team, not you. And off he went. I'm sure he said that to himself, not to the manager. He turned up. So obviously he played a match, then travelled, and was going to play a match after playing the testimonial match. So he was a bit tired.
Yeah.
So I turn up at the hotel, and there's Ozzy pacing up and down in the foyer. And I said, what's the problem? Yeah, no problem. He said that Diego's gone to sleep in his room because he's knackered from the match and the travelling. But I can't get hold of him because he's taken the phone off the hook. He said, he'll have a little kip and he'll be down shortly. Anyway, I'm waiting with Ozzy for 2 hours in the foyer. And it's about 5:30. And Ozzy is now losing all his hair, pulling it all out, going, there's no way on a match day. He said, well, I'm hoping a big crowd. We're going to get from central London down the Seven Sisters Road in time for the game.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, well, don't worry. I'll only take, he said, 5 minutes. He said, we haven't got 5 minutes. There's no way you're having that interview now. I said, well, you can't do that. We've got 7 pages at the back page of the Mirror waiting for my big interview with Diego.
Yeah.
Monty Fresco, remember Monty Fresco?
Yeah.
The great photographer. He was there with his camera and all that sort of stuff. I said, what about a picture? He said, no. He said, we're going trying to get to the game, you know. My testimonial, and I'm going to be late for my own game. Anyway, 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, the lift opened, and out came Diego in the lift. And it was like that old advert about how many people can you get in a Mini? Because about 50 people poured out this little lift. His wife, his kids, his masseur, his trainers, his managers, his brothers, his sisters, his uncle, his aunt, his grandmother. They all came out all in one go. It was unbelievable. And he was like, you know, right, let's go. We're off to the game. I said, Ozzy, I've got to have my interview. Well, just a picture. He said, okay. We went around the side of the hotel, and there's a great picture of Diego, his first wife, me and Ozzy. And he was looking really grim. And Diego didn't seem to matter too much. Anyway, so I said, well, I've got to have a story to go with it. He said, right, in my car.
Yeah.
So he gets in the car, Ozzy's driving, Diego's in the other seat, and I'm in the back. So I'm asking Ozzy the questions, he's translating into Portuguese, whatever it was, and Diego's giving him the answers. I hope Ozzy was giving me the right answers. No, I'm writing it all down. Seven Sisters Road, total traffic jam. We're sitting in the traffic jam, and I said, great, I've got more questions to ask you. Anyway, I'm looking out the window, and you can see these Spurs fans in the other arm looking in, and they're going, that's Diego, and that's Ozzy. And the other blokes go, no, don't be silly, they're on the pitch training.
They're
warming up on the pitch. That can't be them. Anyway, we go up, eventually crawl up the Obsessive Road, get into Tottenham High Road. And in those days, there's a red phone box on the corner. I said, Ozzy, you got to let me out. So he lets me out into the phone box, and I spent an hour in the phone box filing thousands of words from this exclusive interview with Diego. Then I catch the bus down the high road and missed the whole of the first half, but didn't really want it.
It's worth it for the story, though.
But that's how you used to have to do it, didn't you? You used to file it manually. You didn't, you know, it would have to be down a phone line. You'd have to, you know, it was deadline conscious. It was the print run. It was a different time, wasn't it? For in terms of scoops and stories and headlines, it was a.
Well, I hate to come back to the black book, but I'm sure you'll go in more detail when you next have me on there, if you still want me on.
Oh, we will.
You know, in those days when I first started, it was all hot metal. You know, line by line, they used to print, you know, put it on into the machines. But there was a poor old copy taker sitting there taking down all my words, you know, smashing them out of 10 to the dozen. But it was a funny old way of doing it back then compared to how it's done now. But it was a great scoop at the time.
Yeah. 86 was your favourite World Cup because it was your first one. Any others that stand out in the memory?
Well,
Because we,
they just kept on going. They kept on going because in 1990, I've written a book about the World Cup there.
Yeah,
You know, Italia '90. I interviewed. I did a Italia '90 revisited. Interviewed every single England player that was in the dressing room. Most of them telling stories about Gaza.
yeah,
But thoroughly enjoyable. I mean, I could sit here all night telling you about Italia '90. It was fantastic. But then '94, going to the States with no England, which meant I was on a plane, off a plane, on a plane, off a plane, and went to virtually every single game you could. So it was a completely different experience than being a camp follower and following England.
yeah,
And then
were you at
'98,
that at that one? Sorry, Harry. Were you then, because England weren't there? You were trying to follow a story around the tournament, because obviously, if you're based with England, you're using England as the crux of your storytelling. When they didn't qualify in '98, and you know, the USA is a big country, you were just trying to follow a story around jumping on a plane from wherever to wherever. Then is that? I mean, that's quite a challenge, I would
well,
imagine.
you name the city, I've been there.
yeah, yeah,
But there were some fantastic stories. Of course, you know, Diego was phenomenal in a couple of games until we realised that he was pumped up with drugs.
yeah,
And I had to make a quick detour to Dallas for the FIFA disciplinary announcement, the fact that he was banned. And when I got there, you know, I've never seen so many journalists in one place at one time.
Yeah,
You could not get through the front door. So they had screens set up inside different rooms and outside, big screens. You never actually weren't in the disciplinary hearing
yeah,
or the announcement by FIFA. You had to sit outside to get outside of a screen. It was just phenomenal.
but it was a world-breaking story, wasn't it? That's the thing. It was, you know, it was front page, back page, middle page headlines, wasn't it? The whole, you
Around the
know,
world.
Maradona of all players. But it seemed pretty obvious from his run up to the camera after he'd scored. I think it was against Belgium, that maybe some substances were in use, I would
It did look
suspect.
like that, didn't it? But then '98 France. I mean, that was magnificent in France. You know,
Mm,
yeah,
that model had a, and you know, and get sacked for something bizarre. You know, we talk about Thomas Tuchel worrying about the DNA might not be in the England
yeah,
team, might not be in English football. But of course, we win Champions Leagues and are phenomenal in Europe because we got Argentinian, Spanish, French, Italian, Belgian players in the club teams.
yeah,
But when it comes to England, it's just English players. He's quite right. Of course, it's not in our DNA, but Glenn Hoddle was putting it in our DNA. I mean, he played in France. He brought over lots of new techniques that he learned from Arsene Wenger over a
mm,
period of time, and playing in the French football and how they had the DNA that he was bringing to the England team. I mean, he played wing backs and a back three, and he had some phenomenal young players.
mm,
yeah,
And that team could easily have won the World Cup if Beckham had have been sent off. But
yeah,
even if he had have been, Sol Campbell was denied a perfectly decent goal in extra time.
yeah, it
In fact,
was, yeah,
yeah, Glenn was waving his players back because it was the whole Argentine team attacking and the England team celebrating the winner.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I think going back to that, my view as a football fan, you know, match going fan and observer is, if Hoddle had stayed, I think that team would have won something, the Euros or the following World Cup. I think
Oh, all of it.
we were unlucky in that
yeah,
tournament, definitely. You know, like you said, the Beckham sending off, the Sol Campbell, you know, clearly over the line. But I think Hoddle's training methods were ahead of the time, weren't they? And I think he was an innovator, and you know, he got sacked for what he said, and the Eileen Drury thing and all that was all a bit sort of strange, but actually on the pitch and as a coach, he was a he was sadly missed, because you know, we went to Kevin, and you know, Kevin, bless him, he resigned in the toilets at Wembley because he knew he wasn't innovative enough to take an England team and an England squad to the level that they needed. But I think Hoddle would have done. Maybe Terry Venables would have done after '96 if he'd stayed as well. There was that period, wasn't there, for two consecutive managers where it was like so close, so close.
I was gonna. That's a good point you raised there, Nick. I was going to ask you that, Harry. So I totally agree about Glenn. I think if he needed to be given more time, and I think he would have won something. What's your take on? Because obviously Terry Venables resigned, and he didn't want to, but there was reasons behind that. Do you think if Terry had stayed on, do you think we'd have had a good chance in the '98 World Cup if he'd stayed?
I do. I mean,
Yeah,
I think you're talking about Hoddle and Venables, unusually about two English coaches who had that, you know, 'cause he was with Barcelona, of course, as we know,
yeah,
had that knowledge and vision and belief in the techniques of the game. Yeah, I mean, better than Big Sam Allardyce. Good
oh,
grief,
yeah,
I mean, and yet some people still wheel him out now to talk about the techniques of English football. We played one game, obviously good record because he won it, so 100% record. But good grief,
Yeah.
that's why big clubs are wary of appointing English coaches because apart from the two we've been talking about,
yeah,
there's very little to believe in. But those two guys you'd have believed in. I investigated Terry Venables about something completely other than his coaching. For me,
yeah,
the two things are separate. If you're
yeah,
asking me about his ability as a coach, there were none better.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
I
agree. I
think
would agree on that. Yeah,
we're going to miss a couple of questions out that we had because we've got a lot to get through. But I've got a phrase here. You've been involved in football as a fan, as a journalist, as a commentator in terms of commentary on media platforms, etc., and an author. Football's ingrained in your DNA. But the phrase "the game's gone" is probably one of the most overused phrases right now in social commentary, media, etc. In your professional opinion, has the game gone, Harry?
No, it went ages ago.
that's
Oh,
that's
hang
a
on.
brilliant answer.
When did give us a date and time in that's brilliant. Give us a date and time when the game went then, Harry.
Well, players and managers and coaches and I got to know so well because you were able to as a journalist. It was a different era where you were able to mingle with them. You
Yeah,
spent time on the same plane, in the same hotels, in the same carousel with the luggage, and and the training pitch. You could
yeah,
get to know these people, and although they were big earners at their time, and we all thought they were big earners, it's nothing compared to the multi-millionaires, even billionaires you get now.
yeah,
Yeah,
And they played ostensibly for the love of the game.
yeah,
But when you got foreign owners taking over much of the big clubs, then you had most of the foreign owners bringing in foreign coaches and so many foreign players, and they are all mercenaries, as we know.
mm,
They are playing for the money. They're not
yeah,
yeah,
playing. They can kiss the badge as much as they want. They can run around doing whatever they want, but we know why they're there and
yeah,
why
yeah,
they'll move on at the drop of a hat. But and owners are coming in. Their interest is into making a fast back
yeah,
at the end of the day, and it's basically where is the FA? So going back all those years, for me, the FA stood up for the morals of the game. They were the moral leaders for the game. They might not
mm,
have had all the money that the Premier League did,
yeah,
but they were still standing up for the morals of the game. When
mm,
they lost their way in doing so, that's when the game went. And
yeah,
when you allow people like FIFA, the corruption we've seen, and a staple, one of the foundations of the game is you don't have politics in football and sport.
oh,
yeah,
And to allow what happened at this World Cup, Trump having a trumped up award as a peacemaker, how
oh,
bizarre can you get with that? Overturning a red card, and that gall to say wasn't a foul. So you've got a referee, you've got VAR, but you've got Trump. So why
yeah,
yeah,
bother with the referee? He just referees the game. I
yeah,
mean, have politics involved in football to that kind of degree, you know, you could say the game has gone now, but I believe
yeah,
it went ages ago.
yeah,
And we should have won the World Cup in 2006, and politics played a part back then, and
mm,
politics was rife in the game for a long time.
mm,
So for me, the ethos of the game for playing for the love of the
I
game
love a bit.
appeared a long time ago, and the disconnect between fans, that is probably the chasm that
yeah,
was growing, and now fans have got no respect for the people who run the game. They know all they're doing is being fleeced. The amount of money and the tickets in the World Cup, the travel, the hotels, it was just bizarre.
but
Um,
even on a club level though, there's a disconnect between fans and players because it's not a working man's or a working class sport anymore. It is expensive to take, your two kids and a family to the game, and that happened a long time ago. And the introduction of the Premier League money and the revenues it can generate, for me, should have been directly in correlation with a reduction in ticket prices, because ticket prices only represent a very small fraction of revenue for the bigger clubs because they get most of their money from TV deals and other things. But they haven't. They just keep steeping the price up. Sorry, Dom, go on off you.
I agree with what you're saying there, Nick. I was just talking about the game having gone, and I really like what you said about the FA, because I think they've been extraordinarily spineless and silent for far too long when they really should be acting on the best interests of the sport and the fans. And I'm always completely miffed that they aren't. What just added to that question, Harry? I'd be fascinated to get your take on it. What's your take on the Americanization of football? Do you think that's having yet another negative stamp on the game in terms of the fact that Americans, the way they approach sport, it's more entertainment rather than sport and sportsmanship?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more, but I felt the football was squeezed in to the advertising in this World Cup
Yeah.
rather than the other way around. People talking about advertisers being squeezed into the football. Well, it wasn't at all. It used to be, back in my day, a game of two halves, not a game of four quarters, but then a 24, 25-minute half time. I mean, come on. They're taking the what's it, aren't they? I mean, it really is not football anymore as we know it. So,
are you concerned at the American owners and the amount of American owners coming into the Premier League and the Championship and English football? Because I worry that the more they come into it, the more detrimental it becomes. So, obviously, being an Everton fan, we're now owned by Americans. I can really see the changes that they've started to make in the last 18 months to 2 years, and they're not about the fans. It's all about money. They really don't care about us as fans or communities. And for me, that's always been the lifeblood of football. And you can see how they're slowly stripping that away. And it's
You're not a million miles away from cheerleaders at Hill Dickinson, mate.
no, I know. I'm just thinking, a man like yourself, Harry, who's, you've seen it from when football was absolutely its purest. So I'm just wondering how disillusioned you are in terms of where do you think the Americanization will go? Do you think they'll lose interest when the money stops and they'll all just disappear, or do you think this is going to get worse before it gets better?
well, don't put it this way: you ain't seen nothing yet,
Oh
because
wow, okay.
by far the worst is yet to come.
Oh.
So when Glazers were originally thinking of selling, the Saudis came in. Qataris came in, but the Saudis came in, and I know this because I was called to a meeting because they had a set of advisors, but they wanted to broaden their base of advisors because they weren't happy with the answers they were getting. So I was giving them some advice via a third party. So what I discovered was that they had priced Manchester United at £10 billion and were willing to give the Glazers £10 billion cash. It's before Jim Ratcliffe came in and he's just bought part of it, but the options still lie with the Glazers. But they said, okay, yeah, that's fine. It might be 2.5 times what you think it's worth, but well, it's fine. 10 billion is fine. But we want all of Man United's home games to play in Las Vegas.
What?
And then they were told, well, I don't know, why don't you try for half? And then my view was, you're not going to get one, let alone half.
Yeah.
No.
And that's why the Glazers only sold 25% to Jim Ratcliffe, because they still will believe that this Americanization of football will eventually come about, and it will be worth even more than £10 billion, but it will be taking games around the world, particularly to places like Las Vegas, where you've got no restriction on the betting, and they're crying out for sports in those parts of America. So that's where it's heading, and I think you only need maybe one or two more American owners when you've got control of the Premier League and the voting structure.
Yeah.
And no matter what you think or I think, what anyone else thinks, they will do what they want to do eventually.
Well,
Oh,
the only thing that satisfies me against that is what happened when they tried to introduce the European Super League, and I don't think there were any of them were ready for the backlash that was immediate and massive, wasn't it? And I think hopefully fans will look at it because we've done episodes over that. We've been going just over a year, Harry. We like to think we talk about things that football fans. We've done one on Americanization, but we've done one on overseas games because Barcelona announced they were going to play. I can't remember
Villarreal, wasn't it?
Villarreal in
Yeah,
in Miami in a league game, and it didn't happen eventually because of circumstances and the fans and legal action and whatever it might be. But it will only take one, won't it, from one of the major leagues to play a league game in a foreign country for someone to say, there's the first domino, and the whole lot goes. They're desperate to franchise English football, and we're not a franchise business. We're a community-based business, and that's the worry that Dom and I have got, isn't it, mate?
Well, football is a franchise business now. Unfortunately, you look at the way football is structured and co-ownership across the world. It
Mm.
is a franchise business, but it is going to be completely franchise business very shortly. And a couple more American owners, and the way the voting structure is within the Premier League and English football, end of story. They will then be totally in control. So if they vote in, there will be one overseas game per club. That's what it will be. And if those clubs who don't fancy it, they can bugger off to the Football League as far as they're concerned. So
Wow.
it's heading in that direction, and it is coming.
oh,
If you look
that's
at you mentioned Las Vegas, Vancouver Whitecaps at the moment, their fans are up in arms because they're being touted as being looked to be forced to go to play in Vegas, and Vancouver Whitecaps have got history and skin in the game in Vancouver, and that's what I mean by franchise, where they can just up sticks and move. So the NFL and the MLS, the NFL particularly, have moved teams. I think Cardinals have moved before. The Rams have moved several times, and they don't give a monkeys about the local fans. They give a
Well,
monkeys
that's
about
happened.
the
That's happened in English football years ago.
well
yeah,
once, only
Well, if there's
once.
one,
if yeah,
Well,
it's the
yeah.
president.
yeah,
I think
that's a
I
fair
think
point.
I think Harry's right there. I think that's what's coming. I think that's what you're alluding to as well, isn't it, Harry? That's what it's building up towards. I think the more control they get, the more things they slowly drop in and try and indoctrinate and get used to. Then they can start loading in the bigger hitters like taking games abroad, moving teams elsewhere. And I think us, sadly, as fans, all we can do is protest with our feet and not go anymore and hope that other people aren't interested enough that it it dies, and these owners are suddenly left thinking, oh, we didn't understand the English supporters, and we best do something about it. But I don't think they care because I think they are sadly all money driven. So as long as they're getting what they want, they don't give a monkeys about the fans. And
They'll
No,
get
well,
they'll
Dom,
get
yeah,
their money.
you alluded to that, didn't you? You alluded to the fact
yeah,
that that's one of the things I've always said is
yeah,
where is the price capping on tickets in the Premier League? Nowhere.
yeah,
I mean, even
yeah,
without the Americanization of football, they
yeah,
haven't gone for that because their stadiums, the new ones, everything about the clubs are moving towards the corporates, moving towards hospitality,
yeah,
because that's where the big money ticket comes in each time you play a home game. It doesn't come in from the fan.
No.
So the more that they are being steadily eased out, but it's still the working man's sport. They love it. They want to be there, but
Mm.
it's not in
yeah,
the elite part of the Premier League. It's in the Football League.
Yeah.
So each weekend, there's more people coming out to watch football in the Football League than the Premier League,
Mm.
and that's where the working class man is going to be. More and more, even in the National League.
Well, I'm a
yeah,
season ticket holder and an away fan for Middlesbrough, and I love us being competitive in the Championship. But I'm very nervous about if that competitiveness means we get promoted to the Premier League. I actually don't like the product in the Premier League. I'd rather stay competitive in the Championship, bizarrely. Although what you're playing for if you don't want to get promoted, there's an element of, the journey's better than the actual destination if you're not careful. And, you know, I go to home and away games, and it's a community thing. You with fellow fans, working class people or whatever it might be. But it's changing, and there's still lots of money being made at corporate level. Just conscious of time, I've got a question about your wider sports. We referred to you as a sports journalist, and obviously it's a football podcast, and we've already discussed football, which is quite right. But are there any other sports that you got a love of? Anything else that floats your boat that you like to watch and get involved in?
Well, funny enough, when I was on the Daily Mail before I moved to the Mirror, in the summer, the football writers had a long season, and I was not the chief football writer on the Mail, so they'd all gone off on holiday, and the sports editor was a bit short-staffed, and he said to me, "Would I like to do some tennis?" So I went on the tennis scene for a summer. I did all the satellite tournaments. They did Wimbledon,
Yeah.
and loved it, you know. And then I'm a great fan of tennis. Played tennis. We used to when I was younger. So yeah, tennis is something I would watch and have watched in the past and covered.
They're proper athletes as well,
Ian
aren't they?
Aldridge, in fact, wrote a book, long since then, of course, but some time ago. He wrote a book about the history of sport in headlines, newspaper headlines, and it was over about 100 years, in fact. And all the football headlines I've got, the only one I made the book was a tennis one, because I broke the story about McEnroe. Was one warning away of being thrown out of Wimbledon after his rant in the first game there. And it's a long story how I got that interview with him, but there's another matter. So yeah, tennis, I would say.
Okay,
Oh, wow.
no worries. Last question, Don, about football being back and things.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're back into the league programme coming up in the next few weeks. So what is on the agenda for you going forward, Harry? I know you've mentioned about, you know, the next book that you're thinking of writing. But apart from that, what does the onset of a new football season hold for you? How will you be getting involved in that?
Well, I've been enjoying in the last few years doing GB News. That's been quite amusing because they're quite strong in their opinions, but don't have many strong opinions on sport apart from me, football. So I enjoy that. They have debating slots, which I enjoy doing. I'm still writing these books. Got a couple coming out very shortly, which I'm sure you'll enjoy when they do. I've been enjoying working with Trevillion, so I might be doing another one with him, who knows, in the future. But for the last 5 years, I've been in new technology, and it just proves you're never too old to be in new tech.
Right.
I've been the sports development director for a company called smartframe.com, and we've been reinventing the wheel, the photographic wheel at least. So we've completely disrupted the photographic industry. We've taken it from virtually the floor into a massive new level with a great new tech that we've been developing. And, you know, I've brought on board Manchester City, and guess who? Everton.
Oh, wow. Wow.
As well as Brentford, and we've got Brighton about to sign up. We've got Millwall. We've got the New York Jets.
I'll be honest with you. Are they historically the worst NFL team that's ever been, though, aren't they? So you've
working our way up, but they're a big name in world sport still. New York.
Not particularly successful, but big name, yeah.
Yeah. But Everton as well. I just thought you'd be interested in that. The Liverpool Echo for the last 2 years, they've been using our embeds. So we stream images and we can produce targeted advertising within the actual image.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Last question from me, conscious of time, Harry. Do you get yourself to the lane very often? It's not called the lane anymore. What's it called? The non-named stadium, the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Yeah. Did you get yourself down to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium to watch
the new lane? I was at the lane when it first opened. I was at the lane when the old lane just closed.
Mm-hmm.
Very sad, really. I remember that the original lane, you know, in Bill Nicholson's time, you know, climbing the steps there as a young boy with a little season ticket, you know. Before that, going through the boys' turnstile for, what was it, 1p or something
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always genuine fans, nostalgic for the original stadiums, but it doesn't hold the facilities that the modern game wants for
No.
Yeah.
hospitality and corporate sector.
I'll
What
be
do you
honest
make of
with
the new
you.
stadium, Harry? What do you make of it? Are you a fan of it? I mean, speaking from someone who's gone from Goodison Park to the Hill Dickinson, I miss Goodison Park terribly. But I'm like you, it's a nature of the times we're in, and being restrictive of where we were in terms of not being able to renovate that stadium. But I do miss Goodison. Are you a big fan of the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, or
Well,
just
it's hard not to be. I mean, having had the privilege of looking at all the facilities,
yeah,
including the cigar room,
yeah, yeah,
I've never seen anything like it.
yeah,
It must be on par with anything they've got in the States, in their best stadiums.
absolutely,
But
yeah,
it's just phenomenal. And the atmosphere created in the stadium is just unreal in
yeah,
comparison. But nostalgia is a funny thing. You always think it was better in the past.
yeah. And
Well,
one last final question I've got to ask you: what do you think Spurs on the pitch this season? What do you reckon? They
Oh,
had a
I'm
good pre-season. You think that's
definitely
decided?
going to win the Premier League this season. Nearly got relegated last. I mean, what else can they do? I mean, they've signed some really decent players. I
Yeah,
mean, sometimes it's the decent players rather than the global superstars at the £111 million.
yeah,
Because look at Newcastle. They signed £250 million, two players for £250 million last season.
yeah,
One of them never played at all,
yeah,
and the other one didn't play very well.
yeah.
So there's no guarantee, no matter what you spend. I always say it's really the manager finding the right blend. Getting
Absolutely.
right
Yeah,
players, the right positions, like a Guardiola, like a Klopp. And would you get rid of Tuchel? Well, if Guardiola wants to take over the England team, yeah, like a bloody shot I would. But I'll get rid of Tuchel and bring in who?
yeah.
Bring back Sam Allardyce?
yeah,
Come on. You're going to get
Exactly.
in.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Be careful what you wish for. Yeah, I think
yeah.
you should give
Well,
them more time.
interestingly, in a couple of weeks, Harry, on this podcast, we've got a lady who's a Spurs podcaster, and we're interviewing her based on 2 seasons of finishing 17th but winning a European trophy, and then how she feels about big spending Spurs in the summer. We're going to discuss the roller coaster of being a Spurs fan over the next. So she'll be on a couple of episodes down the line. So keep an eye out for that. She's called Holly Agabar, and she's a match going Spurs fan. I think she goes home and away, but she's got some real strong views on, it's our year, or at least we might, a bit like why not win the Premier League? Sights high.
Yeah,
2 seasons of finishing 17th, though. You've got to be careful of that drain hole, haven't you?
Yeah, well, you've got to remember, and pass on this view, even in certain periods where they were so critical, found so critical, not spending enough money, they were one of the biggest spenders in Europe and always have been.
Yeah.
Daniel Levy gets a very bad press, but he splashed the cash, no question. But did his manager splash it on the right players? And that's the question. So, have they spent this amount of money on the right players?
Yeah.
time will
Quality over
tell.
quantity. Yeah.
Yeah,
On that basis, guys, I'm going to share the outro slide just to let people know a little bit about kind of what's next and that kind of thing. Harry, that has been genuinely an absolute pleasure. Your book, we're going to put the details in the show notes so people can find it on Amazon and hopefully push your sales. It's beautifully illustrated, well written, etc. On episode 60, next time, Dom and I are back to domestic football. We've got loads of pre-season and transfer stuff already to talk about, including some weird stories that keep arising this week from people who are refusing to leave training grounds to all sorts of other weird and wonderful stuff. So we'll see you next time. We're on, as you know, all the usual platforms, YouTube, podcasts, etc. And we'll see you from there. But Harry, Dom, brilliant episode. I could talk to you all night, and honestly, you'd be the guy I'd like to go for a pint with. But Dom and I would probably talk your ears off all night, Harry. So we'd apologise we'd apologise in advance for that. You've been a superb, interesting, and wonderful member of the royal journalistic family for UK football and sport. So thanks very much. It's been an absolute privilege.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, and please do come back on it if you want to when you've written your next book, and just for another chat with us, because we'd love to have you on. But definitely when your next book's done, I'd love to hear all about it and talk
Put
about
me
it.
down. Put me down in early November.
Fantastic, we will do
We
that.
will.
Cheers,
Lovely to see
Harry.
you
Thank you so
guys.
much for
See you later.
See you. Bye.
Bye.